The big games went the way of Indiana and Michigan in week 4 in the Big Ten. We've got a heck of a slate across the conference, including Oregon and Penn State. Indiana goes to Kinnick to take on the Hawkeyes of Iowa. And of course, we also have USC, Illinois, and a few others. We'll talk it up here for the next half hour here on the Voice of College Football. Appreciate the comments and questions. Please leave those in the chat. And of course, support us here at the Voice of College Football. Corey Bratta right next to me. Iowa football coverage, of course, from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing good. Good week of football this past weekend. I know some games weren't as close as people hoped. Indiana, Illinois being one. Man, I don't know the last time when's the last time we had a Big Ten game last until almost 2:00 in the morning? Like that's what Michigan State USC was, and Michigan State at least made the predictions a little bit closer when they scored a semi-late touchdown to make it a 14-point win for USC. But that game played out about as we expected. Iowa, Illinois lived up to the hype. Iowa, Rutgers lived up to the hype, and then some. And then Notre Dame, Purdue, wasn't that what was the final on that one? 56-30. Kind of a weird game where Purdue hung around for a while, and then this onslaught of offense from Notre Dame. I didn't watch all of that game, but and then I predicted on Saturday. Didn't go on a limb on this. I said I fully expect Mike Gundy and Luke Fickell to be fired before season's end. One down, one to go. I mean, I think a lot of people expected Gundy to last longer than Fickell just because of his history there. But Gundy's out, and I would not be surprised if Fickell is next.
Nor would I. And in looking at what most people have tabulated as the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten, we've looked at that Wisconsin transition from non-conference games into conference games and checked off Maryland as well. They'll at least win that, and then they really have to start facing the tough teams in the Big Ten. But they got knocked around as a 10 or 11 point favorite against Maryland. And so one of those games that had to be a win is an L. So it is, yes, gone off the rails in Madison.
What business did they have being a 10-point favorite in that game? I mean, I know it's hindsight's 2020, but where's the evidence that supports making them a 10-point favorite? That line is interesting to me.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think that Vegas would be buying into a brand, that they would be fooled by a brand that Wisconsin's supposed to be better than Maryland. But, you know, this is a slow deterioration. It's not like Wisconsin fell off the cliff 2 weeks ago like they were some great football team last year. You know, we've seen this all coming. Wisconsin at home, and both teams had beaten up on inferior teams, and Wisconsin got drubbed at Alabama. I don't know why it was that sizable.
And, Michigan narrowly beating Nebraska, I don't think surprised either one of us. Pretty close to what the Sharps had, and I took Nebraska against the spread narrowly.
You're going to have some Michigan fans coming after you for calling it a narrow win. Now, I just got off the Michigan podcast.
Numbers-wise, yeah. Final score-wise, it was narrow. I know.
Yeah, and it was. When you score with 90 seconds to 2 minutes left, something in that range, Nebraska scored to cut it to 30-27, and you can execute an onside kick, then the game's still in doubt, regardless of who's been the better team. Nebraska was able to hang around and stay in there. But I just found that funny as well, because I posted an instant analysis that was flooded with, well, if you do this and that happened and this should have happened and that should have happened, Michigan really won 40-13. And then the next guy was, Michigan really won 38-17 because they should have done this. And then I got hit with Steve Dace, and that's the first thing out of his mouth. Well, we really won the game by. I said, okay, I've been hearing that all week.
Yeah.
I did watch the game. Yes, Michigan was much like Iowa against Rutgers, where the game was in doubt. Rutgers took a lead in the fourth quarter, but Iowa was decidedly the better team. Michigan was decidedly the better team, but that didn't mean that it wasn't a close game or it wasn't a competitive game.
You know what the problem was with the Iowa-Rutgers game, and we don't need to belabor this because we talked about it last hour on the Iowa show, but the problem with the Iowa-Rutgers game is Iowa had a bad quarter in one area, and the problem is that one area is typically devastating for any team, especially Iowa teams, giving up explosive, big plays down the field. And they were just doing that over and over and over and over again. So you build up 21 quick points within like the first 16, 17 minutes of the game, then it's going to, I mean, even if you're going to win, it's going to be in doubt for quite a while when you play offense the way Iowa does, because Iowa does not typically respond with big plays. They had the big play downfield with Dayton Howard, which is great to see. But Rutgers has got some things to figure out defensively. I don't know. That's one of the bigger surprises, maybe underrated surprises so far in this league, as to why Rutgers has all of a sudden become unbelievably good through the air. Like when Cali McManus has time, like they've got NFL receivers and a guy in Cali McManus who he might be an NFL quarterback. I mean, well, that'll be an interesting one. Again, under the radar type of storyline. He could be an NFL quarterback, but they don't have a run game. They're not playing good defense. With who their head coach is, that surprises me. And obviously, it's surprising that an Illinois team would give up 60-some to anybody with who their head coach is. But things snowball, and this has been a weird year. More blowouts than normal, not just because Big Ten teams scheduled more crap out of conference games than normal, but there have been lopsided games within the conference, within the league. And, I mean, one of the weirder storylines was this past weekend. I don't know how – these are the types of weird things you just can't explain. How does Minnesota 2 weeks ago lose by double digits to Cal? And then Cal comes back this past week and gets absolutely knocked around, taken to the woodshed, taken to the chopping block. They get skunked against a San Diego State team that got obliterated by Wazoo. And Wazoo's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the weird transitive property things. That's why the transitive property doesn't work in football, but it's weird, man. It's extreme. I don't know what to think of Minnesota.
Yeah. So, yeah, you cannot go by the transitive property, but the transitive property is part of a resume, and the resume does play out for these teams over the course of, but you can always connect the dots and come up with crazy scenarios. And that was a game that shocked me. I always go through the scores and try to determine, okay, how many upsets were there among power conference teams? So I was going, and that was the most egregious one. Cal was a 14-point favorite in that game and lost by 34.
They lost
Vegas
by 30,
was off by
30.
Vegas
It was
off.
34. They scored another touchdown. I saw it was 27-0.
San Diego State scored
again. Oh, I mean, that's unbelievable. And I don't know how you explain it other than it's that extreme going on the road out west. Like, that's the only explanation I can come up with, that it's just the factor that Minnesota had to go all the way out to California, and it can be, I mean, Iowa lost out to UCLA last year, and that was weird. That was an almost unexplainable event, how Iowa gave up 200 plus yards on the ground to a Bruins team that didn't run the ball well against anyone. So maybe those are two lines of evidence that you could use to explain it. It doesn't kill Minnesota, but it doesn't affect them in the conference race. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting team to follow now moving forward.
And speaking of traveling, I think the situation that is most gaining traction in the conference, and it's because it's the biggest game in the conference and arguably the biggest one in college football this year thus far, is Oregon having to travel. They just did last week. No, I'm sorry. That was 2 weeks ago. They went to Northwestern. The Big Ten schedulers have done, I believe, a really good job of making sure that nobody's traveling multiple time zones back-to-back weeks. But 2 weeks ago, of course, Oregon had to travel to Northwestern. Now they make the trip to Happy Valley for the game of the week, along with Alabama, Georgia. Penn State, welcome to the 2025 college football season. They are finally playing somebody with a pulse, and they definitely have a pulse in Dante Moore and Oregon.
If you were to be asked this question, what is Oregon's most impressive performance so far this year? I have an answer to that you're not going to agree with.
The Montana State game.
It is. You know why? Because Montana State's actually good. None of the other teams they've played are good. In fact, I said preseason, Oregon's schedule could be tricky. Like, it wasn't a good non-conference, but it could be tricky. I just didn't expect Oregon State and Oklahoma State to be so unbelievably bad. I mean, so unbelievably bad. Okay, now maybe you argue Northwestern, because they dominated that team, and maybe they're not as bad as Oklahoma State and Oregon State. But the fact that Oregon beat Montana State by 46, and Montana State, the only other game they've lost so far this season is to South Dakota State. This is, the power in the FCS. So finally we get Oregon playing somebody. But I also think I underestimated Oregon a little bit. I thought they'd take a little bit bigger of a step back with a change at quarterback. But as you alluded to, Dante Moore's been phenomenal. And now we get to see a real battle. Aller's been a little bit underwhelming as well. I think it's interesting. Yeah, I don't care about Heisman talk at this point in the season. Neither do you. But it's interesting some of the people that are getting in those conversations already. Like Fernando Mendoza is a guy who's been in the discussion here after his performance against Illinois. And maybe that's just because that was a top 25 battle and whatnot. We don't need to talk about that game up and down because we did that last hour as well. But as I said to your Indiana guys, I just don't. How can you put a guy like that on the Heisman watch list when he's got one impressive game against somebody that matters? He doesn't have anything else. ODU doesn't count. Who did they play? Chaminade. Who else did they play on their schedule? Who else?
Indiana State.
Indiana State
and
Alcorn.
State, Old Dominion.
He played
Kennesaw State.
Kennesaw, not Alcorn.
Yeah,
Kennesaw. So, and maybe Mendoza, if Mendoza carves up the Iowa defense from start to finish Saturday, then yeah, I can understand a little bit. One thing about Mendoza, and I didn't mention this last hour, I watched that Illinois game back, and you know what I'm talking about. He's similar to Callie McManus in a couple of ways. Not only is he really efficient with his arm, he is not very mobile. I mean, he might be a great quarterback. He may be the next Tom Brady, but Tom Brady wasn't mobile. He is not mobile. So that's one aspect of where Iowa, when they typically struggle against opposing offenses, usually it's guys who can also hurt them with their feet. Sean Clifford, Trace McSorley, Rocco Becht. This guy is not very mobile. So he's got a really, it appears that he has a very good line protecting him. But if Iowa can get into the backfield, that might open up Iowa to be a little bit more aggressive without worrying about him getting out in space and making him pay with his legs, as opposed to a Mark Gronowski who can do that.
It is a really solid slate of games, as I mentioned off the top, when you headline with Penn State, Oregon. Again, we're not going to talk a lot Indiana, Iowa, because we just did for the last hour. So check out the preview with Corey and myself on the Iowa show. And Corey's going to have much more throughout the week. And then USC coming back, traveling time zones to Illinois. Illinois needs a big bounce back. We saw USC put up 38 points against Michigan State, and they're undefeated. So if USC wins this game, even though we're kind of questioning if Illinois is anywhere close to what a number of people thought of them in the preseason, they're going to be a 3-0 team in the Big Ten, and they're going to be 5-0 overall if they're able to pull off the win at Illinois. And I got to guess that they're somewhat of a favorite in that game.
What game are you alluding to?
USC and Illinois.
That's next week? Or that's this week? That's this week. That's right. Yeah. And I do think, by the way, I don't want to just totally discount Illinois. I actually think Illinois will probably bounce back, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win. Because Brett alluded to post-game, he said, how we respond to this is what's going to define the team. And I'm an Iowa guy. I've seen Iowa teams. 2016 is a prime example, Mark. You remember what happened when Iowa played at Happy Valley in the whiteout in 2016? They got beat by like 30, and they came back next week and beat a top 3 Michigan team at home. So it can be done. USC was not overly impressive when they came to this part of the country last time when they played Purdue a couple of weeks ago. So that's a scary game if I'm a USC fan, and one that I could easily see. 11 a.m. kick. That's 9 a.m. Cali time. I could see them going out there and losing. I think Illinois is better than they should. I think it was a combination. It was a perfect storm, right? Yeah. When you have a 50-point win, it's a combination of it got out, the rug got pulled out from Illinois early. You take a special teams touchdown into account. The crowd's, amped up. You got your quarterback gets jittery and uncertain. The coaches are playing behind the curveball because you get behind early. It was a perfect storm. Those types of results don't happen every day because of that. But when the perfect storm arrives, it can happen. And I think Indiana will probably do this a little bit. Illinois will do this a little bit. And if those two teams played again next week, it might be closer to what Vegas had projected. And my guess is if Indiana played Illinois again this next week, they maybe opened last week as like a 5-point favorite against the Illini. They may open as a 9-point favorite, but it wouldn't be as big of a difference as what some people are making it out to be. People overreact to individual results. You say that all the time.
We all know that Indiana is not 53 points better than Illinois, because if they were, then that would throw off the discrepancies and disparities between every team in the conference. None of them would make sense then, because that would automatically make Indiana the best team in the Big Ten by far. It wouldn't even be close, because Ohio State's playing Illinois in a few weeks. Are they going to win that game by 53 points? Probably not. Maybe they beat them by 14. Maybe they beat them by 24. But so, yes, Indiana performed remarkably, should be given all the credit for the win. And on the scoreboard, hey, it's marked in the record books 63-10, and that's what it is. And then we also, we've gone through like 4 games, and still an under the radar sneaky good game possibly could be Ohio State having to travel to Seattle to take on Washington. That could be a game where the Buckeyes need to make sure that they don't get tripped up.
Yeah, and it's to Washington's favor, obviously, that last week was not a close game, because it's a rivalry that could have easily been an emotional victory. But when you win by 30 against a rival, maybe some of that emotion gets let out as the game goes on in the third and fourth quarters. So that's a positive. And yeah, the trip across 3 time zones is certainly a storyline to follow. I haven't watched much of Washington this year. I'll admit I didn't watch them versus Wazoo last week just because Wazoo was horrible. Did you watch the Huskies and the Cougars at all?
I did not. I do my best to take in 2 games at noon, 2 at 3:30, 2 prime time, and that was not one of the selections.
It's amazing. I'll give credit to NBC. And I know that this is kind of a draft process through the season. It's not on a week-by-week basis, but you could argue they have by far the best lineup. I know Fox gets the big noon game between 2 top 25 teams, but I mean, you could just keep it locked into Peacock from 2:30 until 10 and have phenomenal Big Ten action from Oregon and Penn State, Indiana and Iowa. And I know Oregon and Penn State's also on NBC, but and did you know, Mark, you maybe know this, but you knew that the NBA is returning to NBC this year. Like, NBC is back in the sports zone, whereas they were out of, with the exception being Sunday Night Football, NFL football, they were out of it for a long time. The NBA is coming back to NBC this year.
The last time, now, I'm not an NBA guy, but I have watched a lot of NBA basketball, going back further than I would want to admit here. To let's say the mid 2000s is kind of when I started to fall off. I remember NBC having, certainly they had the last Jordan shot for the Bulls. They still had the finals then. And then I remember the Spurs and the Nets in like 2002 still being on NBC. And then I remember those Pistons series being on ABC against the Lakers. Yes. So I don't remember exactly which series was the final one on NBC.
Yeah, 2002, you're talking about me being like 5 or 6 years old. So I've never really experienced NBA on NBC besides looking up old videos.
Back in the day with Bill Walton and Snapper Jones.
Oh, sure. And Bill Walton, I mean, I do know me some Bill Walton, because that guy, he's one of the more tragic stories in all of professional sports history, just his career and how talented he was. And he's right up there with John Daly. John Daly's another one. It's like unbelievable talent, but he's chosen to go the direction he has. Like, he could have probably been one of the all-time greats in his respective sport. But I digress. No, it's a great lineup. And if there was one game I could watch this week, it would be Oregon-Penn State. But I think the second best game on the schedule is debatable. You could argue it's USC-Illinois. You could argue Ohio State at Washington. Indiana-Iowa is going to be a phenomenal atmosphere. Like, that is going to be an absolutely phenomenal atmosphere, as is the whiteout. It always is.
because this is what Iowa fans understand, and I know this, and I know it a lot better in the last 3 to 4 years since we've built this Iowa channel, and I talk to Hawkeye fans all the time, but I even knew it years ago. Iowa fans can smell blood, and they can also sense when the other team's on a roll and their team needs them.
Sure. Yeah.
And they know this Indiana team's hot. They just played a really good team, or who we thought was going to be a really good team, and they know what happened last week, and they know our football team needs us.
Yeah, and I would say this: Indiana's the same team. If we're assuming Indiana's the same team, regardless of if they blew Illinois out last week or not, I would much rather them do what they did to Illinois, right? I don't want them, if they're the same team this week, I'm glad that they did that as opposed to a close win against Illinois. It makes it very easy for the narrative to remain constant with Kirk Ferentz. So easy to get his guys up, I would think. And a lot of fans are like scared. They just have assumed that they're going to lose, which that doesn't mean they're not going to come out and be nuts on Saturday, because they will. That's not going to affect the environment at all. But I've been surprised with even some of the people in my circle that have been like, well, next week's a loss. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I keep thinking, am I being delusional like I was, or people accused me of being in 2021 when Iowa played in the Big Ten title game and I said I thought Iowa had a shot at winning, and I went out on a limb and said they're going to win? Maybe I am being delusional like that, but this isn't Michigan of 2021. At least we don't have evidence yet, enough evidence to act like this is Michigan of 2021. You could argue I was being delusional then because we saw a whole year of Michigan. We have seen one game, and I said it to your guys earlier. The game was at home, Mark. They have not played on the road. Does that not count for a lot? We don't know what Mendoza has not played with this team and this staff on the road one time. They haven't done it. So, yeah, and I went back. He was really impressive at Cal. I got it. He's one of the guys that flew under my radar. He was impressive at Cal. I tried to find a game where he underperformed at Cal, and the team was not very good at times. But, boy, he was good at Florida State. He was good early in the year at – who did they play last non-conference?
They had a 35-10 lead on Miami.
He was on the road, right?
Well, that was at home.
Okay, didn't they play somebody on the road non-conference? Maybe not. It doesn't matter.
Auburn.
That's the one.
Beat Auburn.
And he was very good against them on the road. And I would think, boy, that's a tough environment to go into. So, yeah, I'll tell you what, this is opportunity time for Iowa. This is the opportunity to get the monkey off their back of not having beaten a top 25 team since 2021. It's an opportunity to get back on the national scene. If they win this game, there will be people now that start talking about Iowa maybe being a sleeper team again in the playoff. That disappeared after they lost to Iowa State. If they lose, then it's almost assured that they are not going to be in an at-large position for the playoff, because that would mean they basically have to be perfect from then on out, and they're not going to beat Oregon and Penn State at home. So it's a huge game. It's a huge game at every level. It's a perfect start time. I don't care that it's on Peacock. This is a great – I brought this up last show. Well, actually, I brought up a different one. Ohio State beats Penn State Classic 2017, then gets blown out at Iowa. And by the way, Iowa blows out Ohio State that week, comes back the next week, plays in Madison. They get their pants pulled down. And by the way, they couldn't score in that game. Both of their touchdowns were from Josh Jackson pick sixes. So.
And Ohio State came home the next week to take on a good Michigan State team that eventually won the Holiday Bowl, won 10 games, and Ohio State beat them 48-3.
It's a week-to-week thing, folks, and that's Ohio State we're talking about. That's an Ohio State program that had been established. Indiana may be established, but that's still up in the air. So, anyways, it's a fun weekend coming up.
That was Urban Meyer's worst team. They went 12-2. They won the Big Ten championship, won the Cotton Bowl that year. I know I threw this stat at you, and I'm not going to be able to recite it to a T, but I threw this at you a couple months ago as I was probably going through my Phil Steele. And I just looked up the Ohio State point spread at Washington. They're an 8.5-point favorite, so they're still a pretty substantial road favorite, but I know I threw this at you, and I know you need to go, but I looked over the last 5 years because Phil Steele lays out like the last 5 or 6 years of point spreads for everyone, and I just started to notice, and I was curious. Ohio State's only been a single-digit favorite like 5 times in the last 50 games.
So what does Vegas know about Washington that we don't? Other than just it's a team that's
difficult trip.
that's exactly.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, is that just all? I don't know. What does history say about Ohio State traveling to the West Coast? I don't know.
And one that it's tough for all Big Ten teams, including Ohio State, hasn't had enormous success.
Yeah.
They went there in '86 and got scalped, and that Ohio State team turned out to be really good, but they got annihilated.
Well, what about since the addition of the 4 teams?
Well, they went out to play Oregon,
and they lost.
They lost by 1 point.
But they lost. I mean, they didn't go out there and dominate a team like they do most weeks,
and like they did 2 to 3 months later when they played them in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and that's totally different circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Going out there in a game, you have, many
neutral site.
Well, and you've got prep time. You're not flying out there and then playing. You're out there for a while. So, all
right, Corey. I know you need to run.
Thanks, it's always fun. Here. It's always fun. All right. Take care, Mark. Thanks.
All right, Corey. Thanks. Corey Brad from the Hawkeye of the Storm. You guys should know the destination by now. But again, from the Hawkeye of the Storm, Iowa coverage taking on Indiana. Check out the preview that we just did with our Indiana guys and Corey over on the Iowa channel. It was a fun 60 minutes of talking Indiana and Iowa. And since I don't have any calls, I would love the chat to tell me this. You've got Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Washington, Indiana, Iowa, USC, Illinois. Those are the 4 games that, man, I want to see all 4 of those games. If you could only watch one game this weekend, you can only watch one game. And for those of you who have a team in the fight, throw your team out. I want it to be an objective measurement. What is the one game that you would want to see? So if you're an Ohio State fan, throw out Ohio State, Washington. Look at the other games. What game in the Big Ten do you want to see this weekend above any other game? And maybe that's not fair. Oregon, Penn State is the obvious choice. Those other games are a notch below. But I am intrigued by all these games. They all bring something different that really intrigues me. To think about, again, what Indiana did last weekend and them going to Kinnick to take on Iowa, who's notoriously a huge underdog upset team that's got a history of pulling that off at home. Illinois having to bounce back. USC could go to 5-0 and 3-0 in the Big Ten. And then we start talking about USC possibly being a bit of a dark horse, not a complete dark horse. I certainly talked about USC being a factor in the Big Ten, but they were below that Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State line somewhere. And then again, Ohio State going out to Washington. That is going to be intriguing as well. Damon Williams has his shot at the Buckeyes defense. I knew there would be somebody. UCLA and Northwestern. And I haven't even looked up to see who is the interim coach for UCLA. That is shame on me for not knowing that. That is me basically not being the voice of college football. That means that I'm working on a lot of other things all the time and not devoting as much to college football knowledge and information as I used to. Well, folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, and I don't feel so bad about shutting down the show because I'm going to be back at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have guests representing Arizona State, TCU. They play a big Friday night matchup. And then we're going to take your calls 10 p.m. Eastern time tonight. So make it on back for the College Football Show, and we will see you then.